Good evening, everyone. We are continuing our session on the book of First Samuel, and I we have done an introduction yesterday, and I thought it would be useful for us to do a quick recap on the first five verses for a very particular purpose. First Samuel, as you can tell, is very different from the other prophet books of the split kingdom that we have done, or in the post-exile era. And it is important then for us to be very careful with this kind of a writing. Now, the book of First Samuel continues on from the book of Judges, and as you can tell, the book of Judges to the book of First Samuel are what we call narrative type of of writing. Now, narrative type of writing or the narrative style of writing in Hebrew is somewhat different from, and say, an English storybook. It has plot devices, it has introduction, it has highlights, it has key material, but it also embraces the Hebrew style of writing in a narrative. And things flow in a sequence, meaning one after another. And in a Hebrew narrative, it is important for us to realize that the audience are listening to the text being read, and the people would be listening very carefully to the Hebrew words. And the Hebrew words excite the mind to imagine the actions that flows one from another, the words that are said by specific individuals, and it is really to mimic something that we know today as a video. And in the ancient Hebrew era, there are no videos. You cannot play a video or shoot a video. And so the language itself is very vivid. And when you read it in the Hebrew, it is supposed to conjure in the minds of the listeners the imagery, the video, so to speak, of what is transpiring. That's one. But the reason why I want to do a quick recap is this: the beginning of every book, like Samuel, is the setting the stage scenario. And if we do not follow the key elements of the stage being set, we would lose the plot. And we tend to think of little events as a standalone, but it's not. God has so instructed all these to be written in a way to leave it for us to read so that we can benefit from what is being instructed. So a narrative is actually to tell us the scenes as it moves from one to another, and to show us the key plots, the key backgrounds, the key messages, the key elements, so that as we move down the narrative, that we will not forget, and those will be the focal points. And so, as in any long-winded series that you watch on TV, things that has 50 chapters or 100 chapters, you will never ever read or watch that series at the back. You have to watch it from the front as it builds the plot. And so here we are in First Samuel chapter 1. The plot is being built. And so we're talking about a certain man from the country of Ephraim. He's an Ephraimite, someone who is noble, someone who is wealthy. His name is Elkanah. And Elkanah has two wives. One was Hannah, Grace. The other is Peninnah, a precious stone. Both are very nice names. Now, the background that you must pay attention is Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And we talked about it yesterday, how severe it is as a stress to the woman who is married but has no children. Her name may be favor or grace, Hannah. But at this point of the story of the narrative, she appears not to have any of these because she's not able to give birth. Now, think with me because this is a very serious and sad affair in an Oriental culture, in the Chinese culture, in the Indian culture, and also in the Hebrew culture. People like Sarah, people like Rivka, Rebecca, people like Rachel, Rachel, and they are three key women of the patriarchs, and all three had problems conceiving. In fact, they had no children until very late. And we need to understand that that is a stigma, a very negative stigma in society. Even though Sarah had given Hagar to Abraham as a surrogate, it is important that the woman gives birth because the one who gives birth will mock the woman who can't. And that would be the tradition that we have picked up. So it is important for us now to continue on this background. Now, in verse 3, we will know that this man, Elkanah, would go to Shiloh, where he would sacrifice, he would bow down to God. Now, this word yearly, I have already explained yesterday that at every appointed time of the year, he will go to Shiloh to do the feast days and the holy days. Then we are introduced to another gentleman by the name of Eli. Eli is a priest. He has two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. And they are priests, which also means that Eli is a priest. And we will read of this a little later. Now, carrying on from this background in verse 4 is that when Elkanah came to sacrifice, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. And understand this, Elkanah is from the tribe of Levi, and he is from the son of Korah. All right. And so he is a Levite. He is a Levite. We ended with verse 5, and very quickly, to Hannah, he would give a double portion, and I have indicated that this one would be the choice portion because he loved Hannah, meaning there is a preference for Hannah and over Peninnah. That doesn't mean that he doesn't love Peninnah. It's just that he prefers Hannah to Peninnah. Just as we have read in the book of Genesis that Jacob loved Rachel, more than Leah. And in the same way, when Jacob loved Rachel, she had her womb closed. And so we talked about this problem that they ascribe to God when these things that they expect to happen doesn't. And man cannot do a single thing about it. And so giving birth is ascribed to an act of God. And that now happens to Hannah. So let's carry on. So bear all those important elements in mind. We are doing it slowly for chapter 1 because I need to highlight all the key points, and then we would speed up in the following chapters. Verse 6, as we continue, please bear in mind everything that I had highlighted in the first 5 verses. The word rival here would be a rival wife. And this will give us a picture of a contention. The contention between, say, Sarah versus Hagar, right? And I think you will also remember there is uh, Leah versus Rachel. And the reason why there is a contention is very simple. It's because Leah had children and Rachel didn't. Hagar had children and Sarah couldn't. All right, so let's carry on. And she would provoke her, and the idea of provoke her means uh, to to cause her to be angry, right? Provoke her to anger. And in the provocation of her to be angry, it makes her very grievous, right? In grief, she would feel really bad. And this whole idea to irritate her uh, is to cause her to tremble, right? To cause her to tremble. Now, understand that this is not about it is not about fear. She is trembling because she is very upset and very angry to the point of shaking. That is what it means, right? And the reason why they are fighting with each other is because of this whole point. And so when we see uh, Hannah versus Penina, the whole reason is right here. Hannah was not able to give birth. Now, you might think that it is a small matter today, but in the ancient times, when a woman is not able to give birth, she really suffers the mocking and the tyranny of the woman who can. And if you go back and read Genesis, in these two particular instances, Sarah with Hagar, Leah versus Rachel, it would be exactly the same situation between these two women, Penina. Now, that would be a background. What is their relationship with each other? Not very good. Not very good. Now, this is still setting the stage. So, carrying on into verse 7. Now, verse 7 introduces an element of an event. Now, remember, these are all narratives, all right? So it happened year after year, as often as she went up to the house of the Lord, and this would be in Shiloh. She would provoke her. Now, understand this. I think you won't have a problem. It would be Penina would provoke Hannah. And then you find that Hannah would weep and would not eat. Now, this would give us a background of how Hannah feels. She would have a terrible life in such a situation, and it would torment her. I'm trying to highlight I guess, the emotional turmoil that is surrounding the life of Hannah. Uh, it's mainly because we don't appreciate the trials of life in today's society versus the time of Hannah. Now, next one is in verse 8. another important piece of information. Now, remember, at this point in time, they are always going up to the house of the Lord. Where is the house of the Lord? In Shiloh, and that would be the tabernacle. That will also be where the Ark of the Covenant is located. And that would also be the place where the people would come and observe the feast and holy days. And every time she goes up there, she is always reminded of how useless she is. That would be Hannah. And then Elkanah, her husband. Now, every time you see her husband, uh, you would, how would you say, in verse 8, uh, it would be her man, right? Her man. Remember, in the good old days, the wife would call the husband her man, and the man would call the wife his woman. And so all these husbands and wives are modern English words that is substituted. It's not a totally accurate, completely representing the concept, but it will do for our modern day reading. In the old days, the man literally, so to speak, owns the wife, and he is obligated by all measure to protect her, to provide for her, to make sure that she is taken care of. And that is why she would be called his woman. And so remember, Elkanah loved Hannah and says to her, observe, Hannah, why do you cry? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Now, this word sad is not the normal English word sad. And since we can't see it, so let me just highlight this. The word sad is be evil. Now, the English doesn't like the word be evil, but I'm just giving you what the Hebrew actually says. It says be evil. Now, what does be evil actually mean? The whole idea that we don't see the word be evil is that she is not feeling happy. She is not feeling upbeat. And so good and evil is really seen from the eyes of the beholder. And in the eyes of Hannah, sad, grief, pain, anger, complaint, that is not good. In her eyes, that would be evil. And so that would be the expression, why is your heart feeling evil? Now, that is not an English expression, but I'm just using it as a more literal way to express what Elkanah is actually saying here. Now, watch this. Am I not better to you than 10 sons? Now, better is coming from the word tov. And tov, again, like evil, is seen from the eyes of the beholder. And in Elkanah's mind or eyes, he is imagining himself to be everything to Hannah because he has given her the best parts of life versus what he has given to Peninnah. And so he says, why do you still feel this way? Unfortunately, I can tell that Elkanah is not very sensitive as a husband to a wife who is not able to give birth. But he is trying to console her. And so he is trying to say, I am better to you than 10 sons. Now, literally speaking, Peninnah has 10 sons. And as you can tell, in an Oriental culture, sons are very important because it carries the family tradition, it carries the family name, or it carries the father's descendancy. In the Chinese concept, Well, it's a family name that is carried. And so Peninnah was, at least from the statement here, was able to give Elkanah 10 sons. And and Elkanah says, well, I'm better than the 10 sons. I'm loving you more than my 10 sons. I'm loving you more than Peninnah. I'm good in his eyes, anyways, right? And he wants Hannah to be able to see that that is the case. Unfortunately, if you are women, and those of you who are women will really empathize with Hannah, especially in a culture when it is looked down upon any women who are married and who cannot give birth. In verse 9, and it says, after saying all these, and after Elkanah came to console her, Hannah rose after eating and drinking. Now, this is a very important element that we need to understand. Uh, Drinking and eating. The word eating is having a meal. The word drinking is to drink. Now, essentially, you need to understand that in those days, they're not just merely drinking water, they're eating a feast, right? They're eating a feast and drinking wine and strong drinks. So, this is an Oriental, right? An Oriental tradition. Now, in our culture, whenever there is festivities, there's always eating and drinking. And in those days, the Hebrew people did exactly the same. And why? Because they are also Oriental people. And so when they get together, there's always plenty of food and plenty of drinks. This is not your Coca-Cola. This would be strong drinks, right? Intoxicating drinks, alcoholic drinks, and that's also because of the environment that they are in. That they don't have refrigeration, so everything would be fermented. And they are in Shiloh. Remember this. What were they doing in Shiloh? There was a festivity, a feast day. Now, understand the next line here, another piece of information. Eli, the priest. Now, notice now he is introduced as the priest. Earlier on, it was said that his two sons were serving as priests. And I had indicated to you that when you read statements like that, that would also imply the father is a priest. And so Eli is the priest. And he was serving then at the tabernacle. Now, it doesn't mean that he is a high priest. He is not the high priest. He is the priest in charge at that point in time. He was sitting on the seat. Now, every time you read words like this, the seat, means that he has become the judge. Now, judges sit on chairs, or well, we call it chair seats, and it is at the gates, and is always at the gates. And this time around is at the gate of the palace of God. Now, in verse 9, it's a hekal of the Lord. It is a very unusual statement that we are making here because there is no temple, but it is called a temple. What it says is that there is the tabernacle, but the tabernacle is called the temple or the palace of the Lord. That's the word used. So where God is situated, where the Ark of the Covenant is located, that environment of the tabernacle is described as the palace of God, the dwelling of God, where God will appear to the people. And he sits at the doorposts. Now, understand the doorpost is actually the gate posts of the palace. Judges will also sit at the gates of the city. And in this case, it's the gate of the temple or the tabernacle or the palace of God, because he was also doubling up in service in the tabernacle. So need to understand that Eli is now the judge, and this is right after Samson. So this is a period of the time of the judges. It carries on, but it is not located in the book of Judges. It is located in the book of First Samuel. So it is a continuation from the period of Samson. Now, Hannah is the focus now. She has gone to Shiloh. There is a celebration. Eli is now described as a judge, man of great power, and though she is greatly distressed. This word distress is an English word. In the Hebrew, he is bitter. She is very bitter of nefesh, right? Her being, her her inner being, if you want to call the nefesh, her inner being, the breath that is within her is feeling very bitter. And the word bitter is like mara, right? Mara, like bitter water in the book of Exodus. And she's feeling really, really bad. Now, I can't express how grievous she is right now, but just take my word for it. She is extremely, extremely grievous. And so she prayed. Now, this is one of the rare occasions you read the word pray. Pray is palal, and the whole idea here is to, I would say, entreat. Entreat. Now, the word pray may be a very general statement. This word literally means she is engaging with God very intensely, right? Although it's translated as pray, it really means to cause herself to intercede, to really reach out to God. And mainly because of her condition, her social standing, caused by the fact that her womb is closed and she is receiving mockery from the rival wife. And then she wept bitterly. Now, this word weep bitterly, how should we say? The English word is weep bitterly. Um, I think you could use this expression. She's weeping in sheer humiliation, right? Humiliation. I think that would be a good way of expressing that she is now so humiliated by Penina. And it must have been a length of time, right? A length of time already. So this is the same day, and now we go to verse 11. As she went to the tabernacle, right? I think that's where she has gone, and that's where she was in the sight of Eli, and Eli was seated at the doorpost or the gatepost on the seat of the tabernacle, or called the Hekal, the palace of God. And so she went there to pray. Now, notice she did not go in to pray, but she is outside and she is praying. In the Hebrew culture, prayers are generally made verbally and audibly, right? Audibly. There is no concept of a silent prayer, so to speak. And so in verse 11, she made a promise. I would made a vow. I would read this as made. Um, she made a solemn promise. She made a solemn promise to God. And so in her prayer, uh, says these things. And I think it would be useful for us to pay attention to what she said. So she addresses God, O Lord of hosts. And so the recognition of who God is. Her prayer is not one that has the English way of writing a letter, dear God. This is not what it means when it says, "O Lord of hosts." Basically, she is addressing Adonai Tzavaot, and she is now laying her appeal. If, and this is conditional, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maid servant and remember me and not forget your maid servant. Now, all of these are ways of of saying the same thing three times. I think you find this. You have once here and A. Remember me is B. Do not forget your maidservant is a C. She is very intense to ask God to look. This word, look, indeed, look on, is to really see what has happened. Now, this word affliction really means misery. I think it's a good word to use. Please look intensely, see what has happened to your maid servant. The misery. Remember me. Remember me means bring to mind, not forget. Not forget. And the word forget means ignore, right? Ignore. And these are three statements that says the same thing. Please look at me. Remember me. Do not forget me. You see that? There are three things to say. Remember. Basically, I would say that in the English, the emphasis is to remember. Look at me. I'm suffering here. Right? That's basically it. But will give your maidservant a son. She prays to God and asks for a son. Now, this word, a son, I have to explain because it's not as simple. This word really is a seed of men, right? A seed of men. It's not wrong to say a son, but literally it's to tell, to intercede to God, to remember her so that her womb is open, so that she can give birth to a seed of men. And in this case, Elkanah, right? And that is so important to her so that she can identify with Chava, with Eve, the mother of all living, and that she too would be a woman as a mother of a son, someone who is living. And then it says, and then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. Now, this word here, all the days of his life, doesn't mean until he dies, right? And I will talk about it shortly. The second line here is a razor shall never come on his head. Let's do this. And these two are the same. They're talking about the same thing. All the days of his life is the service of a Levi. Right? A service of a Levi is up to 50 years old. All right. The second one is to identify with Judges 16. Judges 16, and this is in the person of Samson, right? Samson, and he has taken the Nazarite vow. The Nazarite vow means a vow of separation to God, meaning everything that he is doing, his life belongs to God until his service is over. And so a razor shall never come on his head means the razor will not, he will not shave his head until his service is over. So there is a condition. So the woman says, if you do this, then I will do that. So you can see this, right? If God, you give me a son, you remember me, open my womb and give me a son, a seed of a man, then I will give him to you. For how long? For this period of time, all the days of his life, an A, and a razor shall never come on his head, a B, that he is a Nazarite, set apart for God. So basically, that's what we have up to verse 11. Now, she is saying all this very quietly. And how do we know that? In verse 12. We carry on that in verse 12, what has happened is as she continued praying and interceding, and she is very intense because she is feeling the mockery, the misery of life before the Lord, and this would be in front of the tabernacle. And then Eli was watching her mouth. What exactly was happening? He was trying to look at her because it is quite an unusual sight. Remember, prayer is audible. Eli is not hearing her. In verse 13, as for Hannah, she was speaking in her heart, meaning very quietly. Very unusual. And only her lips were moving. But her voice was not heard. So what do you see? This is an A, this is a B, and this is a C. Three things that says the same thing. She was very quiet. And that means it is inaudible. So Eli could not hear a single thing that she was saying, which means that he wasn't thinking that she was praying. And it is important for us when we read narratives, we have to see the flip side of the coin. And so when Eli could not hear, he concluded. So the word so is his conclusion. The word and so Eli thought this would be his conclusion. By seeing her this way, that he thought that she was drunk. because it is a time where it was festivities. Remember, lots to eat, lots to drink. And now she is there and she is supposedly praying, but nothing is coming out of her mouth. But her lips were moving and her voice not heard. She was inaudible. And so Eli concluded she wasn't praying, she was actually drunk. Now, this is his contention. And then Eli said to her, verse 14, how long will you make yourself drunk? How long are you going to be drunk? Put away your wine from you. Stop drinking. Right? Stop drinking. And that's his wise words and how wrong he was. Verse 15. But Hannah replied, no, my Lord. This word is Adoni. When it is a word referring to God, then we have Adonai. So the word Adonai is my Lord, but referred to God himself. Adoni is actually my Lord, referring to a person, but a person of great stature. And so remember, Eli, as I had suggested to you, sitting on the seat implies that he has taken on the role of a judge while also the priest. And so she says this, I am a woman oppressed in spirit. The word oppressed in spirit means a hard wind, right? A hard wind. And so what is a hard wind? A hard wind means she has a very grievous, I think, no, very grievous. She is in such grief inside of her. Her wind, her nefesh is grievous. And so she says, I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink. Both are alcoholic, one stronger than the other. Obviously, the wine is a less strong. And then strong drink would be stronger, right? Stronger. And what did she say? But I have poured out my soul before the Lord. And the word pour literally means, you have a jug of water and you pour it onto the ground. And so the jug of water and you pour it into the ground literally means the water is now flowing out. Everything from the jug is poured out. And so she is considering her soul, her nefesh, as something that has contained all her grief. And she has poured out her grief in the face of God. So the word before is to the face. And so she is engaged with knowing God and interceding God. We continue in verse 16, and then we will take a break. Verse 16 says, do not consider your maidservant as a worthless woman, for I have spoken until now of my great concern and provocation. We need to redo this a little bit. The word here, do not consider your maidservant a worthless woman, has to be re-expressed. In verse 16, it would be more proper to say, do not deliver, do not give your maidservant before the, I would say, the unscrupulous. unscrupulous woman. And who would that be? Penina. Because that is the rivalry. It is an intense rivalry. So it is probably better to translate, do not deliver your maidservant before the unscrupulous woman, not just worthless, but a woman who would consider Hannah as worthless. I think that would be a better way of expressing. And Hannah says, "For I have spoken." And the word spoken is like the prophet books, the word davar, right? Davar, spoken. And in this case, brought, uh, brought, I would say, brought complaints or issues. And this would be her issues, right? Of her great concern and provocation. Her great concern. Now, the word concern here is, I would say, I think you can say this as her trouble, right? Her great troubles. And then the word provocation would be grief, right? Would be grief. This would be a better English word to talk about. Because she went there not to complain about Penina, she went there to pour out her soul or her grief to God, and asking God for remembering her, to remember her and to open her womb. So notice, Hannah is a righteous woman. She doesn't go around cursing Penina. She doesn't go to God to ask God to do something against her. But she calls upon God, and the God that she knows as Adonai Tzavaot, the Lord of hosts, to give her a son, give her a child like anyone else, the seed of a man, so that she can now be relieved of the mocking. At the same time, she is promising God, it's a solemn promise, that she would give the son back to God for service, and in a formal way, that the razor would not leave her, would not be on his head, that he would take on a Nazarite vow to be totally separated to God. Now, that is Hannah. I just wanted us to understand that Hannah, although she has great rivalry with Penina, never held a grudge against her. Although she has suffered great mocking, she herself has felt grief, mainly because she is feeling herself as worthless, feeling herself as unable to make Elkanah proud as a father, and in so doing, she reaches out to her God. This is a very incredible introduction to a righteous woman by the name of Hannah, and in so doing, would teach us today how we should look at our own situation and see God in it, and to intercede to God on behalf of yourself. And with this, we come to the end of our session today, and we end with verse 16, and we'll carry on tomorrow.